This is Morgan Hazelwood, back again with more writing tips and writerly musings. Today, I'm here to share with you notes from In the Background class in YA fiction. Now, in the real world, the social class that we come from can have far-reaching consequences, from the jobs we hold to the things that worry us to our long-lasting health. When writing class and its consequences, getting it right can be tricky to do. In the titular panel at Worldcon 2019, Marieke Nÿkamp, Avery Delany, Hooton, and Victoria Lee discussed the ways their class upbringing compared to their social class and the implications inherent within. So first, how the classes differ. I mean, most of us, even those of you watching me, are not rich, but the differences between working class and middle class can be easily missed if you're not paying attention. While when the working class is seen by those who are not actually a part of it, it is typically through a political lens. Either they're seen as lazy bums looking for a handout, or the poor unfortunate who need charity, or something. From those panelists who are part of the working class, they shared with us things that they see done wrong in writing. So when you're part of the working class, social mobility is rare. You don't always know where your next meal is coming from. Your parents are more likely to need help with their bills than be able to help out with you in case of emergency. Groceries, sudden bills, job loss, ER visits, what have you. When you are working class, one bad week can be the difference between a rented home and life on the streets. When you're working class, your accents and your expected behaviors are different, and failure to adhere to what outside society declares as successful or educated sounding can cause people to discount you. Attendance at events that can help your career or your job prospects can easily be beyond your financial means. You might not have the transportation, you might not have the clothes to wear, you might not be able to afford a ticket. When you're working class, health conditions, because of either inadequate health care or not enough time to rest, or even physically demanding jobs, or all of the above, all of these can be negative, and the stress of wondering where you're going to get the money for your next meal, for your next rent. All of this causes more health concerns in those who are working class. When you're working class, transit can be a problem. You're typically either using public transit, rides from friends, or a car that isn't in the best shape, walking, taking a bike. You probably don't have a new off the lot every 5-year car or 3-year. I don't know what people do. When you're working class, you might not always have hot water or electricity, depending on what expenses have come up this month. And when you venture out into the wider world, accent and speech patterns and clothing are all looked down at and seen as something to hide when you're not home. And that can be exhausting, not being able to be yourself or being dismissed if you are. And working class tends to be pretty diverse. So middle class, social mobility is an option, either up or down, at least as far up as upper middle class. Rich might be more of a struggle. When you're middle class, when things are bad, you eat cheap, non-nutritious meals, but you probably can still afford ramen or Chef Boyo. When something goes wrong, your parents can probably help. They might not be able to pay for your car repair or rent, although they might, or bail, but they should at least be able to pay for a bag of groceries. And the middle class actually tends to be a lot more homogeneous. So, let's bring this back to the writing world. How is class represented in YA and other fantasy or fiction? So often we'll see either the aristocracy or the temporarily poor. Almost always the main character is going to be able-bodied and cisgendered. Their gender matches what they were declared at birth. And at the end of the story, the ending, the resolution, almost always involves elevating that main character out of the working class, implying strongly that the character growth and work deserves an improvement, and that being working class is not something to be proud of or strive for, that it's lesser. And after one or two snafus, the uplifted quote-unquote character fits in fine, seamlessly with the upper class or the aristocracy. They're, not finishing their meals because they're stuffed and eating with the right forks and no. And in these worlds, even if they do deal with complex issues, if there's a diverse character, they're probably not intersectional. They're not disabled and working class and a person of color. They have to have one token diverse trait. Why? The world is not like that. So, why do we not see these things in books, typically? If you have seen it in books, please give me links below. I'd love shout outs and suggestions. But why don't we see more diversity? Why don't we see people coming from and staying in a working class situation in novels? It boils down to who is writing and for whom. So books in general, and YA in specific, are written by those with the time and the energy to do so. Books are sold by those who have the money and energy to promote them. And those factors result in very few working class authors. When you're working class, you're tired and you may not have the resources. Also, when you go to publish, publishers look at past sales, and if they don't see any because they're not selling them, they assume there isn't a market and they won't buy working class authors' works. Although, as after the success of The Hate You Give, there has been an upswing in more working class novels, but publishers are still looking at them as a niche, as an issues-driven novel. And publishers typically only snag one book per niche per publishing cycle. So instead of saying, we're going to publish 20 books and getting 20 opportunities to be published, they're saying, oh, we only need one working class novel. The other 19 are in other genres and niches. So they're all fighting for that one slot. And that really, really puts a burden on getting out there and finding a market and a voice. So what writers or agents and editors often see as a neutral environment in an industry run on unpaid internships and publishing companies that are a net loss labor of love isn't actually neutral. People without a social net don't even have a chance. They don't have experiences that overlap very well with most people who have been able to make it into the publishing industry. Many of the guest speakers at Worldcon from working class backgrounds only were able to attend thanks to grants and scholarships and sponsors from schools that they worked at. And others were completely denied visas to enter the country to speak, even award winners. Money talks, and without it, you're left on the outside, so far away you can't even look in. Worldwide, there are millions of people without access to education, much less to libraries. Libraries are not entirely widespread. They're not necessarily local to people. Think of all the stories we're missing because these people never had a chance to share them. So, That's the reality of the situation. How can you help working class or diverse writers get visibility? How can you mitigate the class segregation inherent in the publishing industry? Share their work, promote their work, leave room at the table for them, buy their works, borrow them from the library, review them on Amazon, contribute to their Patreon, donate money to con scholarships, read more diverse works, host writing workshops that are accessible and both monetarily and transport-wise, and more paid internships, especially remote ones. London and New York are very, very expensive places to live, and they're challenging even for the most cisgendered, healthy, well-off person. It's a hard industry, and making it easier and more accessible to more people would go a long way to make it less homogenous. So, what YA stories have you read that have explored class? What did they get right and what did they get wrong? And do you have any other suggestions on how to encourage diverse writers and help promote them? And that's all for today. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that subscribe button and share it with all your friends. It goes a long way towards helping people find me. And I'll be back again next Monday with more writing tips and writerly musings. Bye-bye.